Captain Ibrahim Traore has just dropped a bombshell that's left Western powers trembling in their polished boots. In a move that's as audacious as it is earth-shattering, Traore's administration has obliterated the country's electoral commission, branding it a wasteful relic of foreign manipulation. This isn't just a policy shift, it's an insult to the West's sacred cow of democracy, a system that's kept Africa chained to poverty and subservience for far too long. The announcement, broadcast on state-run RTB TV, has sent shockwaves through Paris, Washington and London, where leaders are scrambling to comprehend a Burkina Faso that no longer bends the knee. Traore, the 37-year-old soldier-turned-revolutionary, is rewriting the rules of African governance, and the global order is reeling. For those who've been paying attention, this is vintage Traore, unapologetic, unrelenting and unafraid. Since storming to power in September 2022, he slammed every door the West once used to control Burkina Faso, from military bases to mineral wealth. Now, by dismantling the Electoral Commission, he's burned the last bridge to Western-style democracy, declaring it a hollow sham that's bled Africa dry. "We are not in a democracy, we are in a revolution," Traore thundered in a recent televised speech, his words crackling with the urgency of a man on a mission. It's surprising that intellectuals imagine a country can develop in democracy. That's false. Democracy is only the end result. We must go through a revolution. And that's exactly what he's doing, dragging Burkina Faso into a new era where sovereignty trumps sentimentality and results outweigh rhetoric. The dissolution of the Independent National Electoral Commission, CNI, is the latest salvo in Traore's war on foreign interference. Territorial Administration Minister Emile Zerbo, in a televised address that left no room for ambiguity, announced that the commission, which gobbled up $870,000 annually in subsidies, was a drain on the nation's resources. This change was necessary to reinforce our sovereign control of the electoral process and limit foreign influences, Zerbo declared, his voice echoing the revolutionary fervour that's become Burkina Faso's hallmark. Henceforth, the Interior Ministry will oversee elections, a move that ensures Burkina Faso's electoral destiny lies in Burkinabe hands, not those of Western donors or NGOs. CENI, once composed of 15 commissioners representing political parties and civil society, was a cornerstone of Burkina Faso's democratic facade. But for Traoré, it was a symbol of everything wrong with the system, bloated, corrupt and beholden to foreign interests. By scrapping it, he's not just saving money, he's severing the strings that tied Burkina Faso to a global order that thrives on African compliance. The West, which has long used democracy as a cudgel to keep African nations in line, is now facing a reality it can't control. A Burkina Faso that answers to its people, not to Paris or Brussels. Traoré's disdain for Western-style democracy isn't new, but his clarity and courage in articulating it are electrifying. In a speech that's still reverberating across the continent, he laid bare the hypocrisy of a system that's failed Africa for decades. "We are not in a democracy, we are in a popular, progressive revolution," he told a rapt audience. "It's not possible to name a single country that has developed in democracy. Democracy is only the end result. We must necessarily go through a revolution, and we are indeed in a revolution. For those who haven't yet understood this, we're still saying it loud and clear. These aren't the words of a dictator drunk on power. They're the battle cry of a leader who's seen through the West's lies. For too long, Africa has been sold the myth that democracy is a magic bullet, a one-size-fits-all solution to poverty, instability, and underdevelopment. But the evidence tells a different story. Nigeria, Africa's poster child for democracy since 1999, is a case study in failure. Over 133 million of its citizens are multidimensionally poor, according to the National Bureau of Statistics, 2022. Its legislature, a supposed bastion of democratic governance, is a bloated cesspool of corruption, consuming billions in allowances while citizens beg for scraps. Kenya, another darling of Western democracy, has seen its youth gunned shut down in the streets for demanding accountability, with over 50 killed in protests in 2024 alone. South Africa, despite its celebrated democratic transition, grapples with unemployment rates above 30% and inequality that rivals apartheid-era levels. Troere's critique cuts to the bone. There are nations where, under democracy, politicians are killing millions of people. If that is democracy, we don't need it. He's not rejecting governance or accountability. He's rejecting a system that's been weaponized to keep Africa dependent. Democracy, as practiced in much of Africa, is a theatre of elections, where politicians bribe voters with bags of rice and promises they never keep. Once in power, they loot the treasury, empower their cronies, and leave the masses to fend for themselves. Troere's revolution is a refusal to play this game any longer. To understand Troere's vision, look beyond Africa's borders. The world's powerhouses didn't rise through democracy. They rose through discipline, vision, and unapologetic prioritization of national interests. China, the world's second largest economy, lifted over 800 million people out of poverty in just 40 years, according to the World Bank. It didn't do so through elections, but through state-led industrialization, strict policies, and a relentless focus on development. Singapore, under Lee Kuan Yew's benevolent dictatorship, transformed from a third-world port city to a global financial hub in a single generation. What a country needs to develop is discipline more than democracy, Lee famously said. And Singapore's gleaming skyscrapers and efficient governance prove him right. Closer to home, Rwanda under Paul Kagame offers a compelling case. Despite Western criticism of his authoritarian tendencies, Kagame has turned Rwanda into one of Africa's fastest-growing economies, with clean cities, reliable infrastructure, and a public health system that outperforms many democratic neighbours. Rwanda's GDP per capita has tripled since 2000, and its streets are safer than those of many Western capitals. Meanwhile, democratic giants like Nigeria and Kenya limp along, their progress stymied by corruption and chaos masquerading as governance. Troere's point is simple but profound. Democracy is not a prerequisite for development, it's a byproduct. Without security, infrastructure, and economic sovereignty, elections are nothing more than political theatre. In Burkina Faso, he's betting on results over rituals, and the early signs are promising. To grasp the magnitude of Troere's revolution, you have to understand the mess he inherited. Before September 2022, Burkina Faso was a textbook case of neo-colonial failure. Under successive governments propped up by France, the country was a playground for foreign interests. Gold, Burkina Faso's most valuable resource, was mined by multinational corporations that paid minimal taxes while local communities saw no benefits. Terrorism ran rampant, with jihadist groups like Ansarul Islam and the Islamic State in the Greater Sahara controlling over 40% of the country's territory. Over 2 million people were displaced, and thousands of schools and health facilities were shuttered. Infrastructure was a nightmare. Roads were so riddled with potholes that travel between cities was a gamble. Agriculture, which employs 80% of Burkina Faso's population, was neglected, with farmers lacking access to modern tools, seeds, or markets. Healthcare was a privilege for the elite, with rural hospitals often lacking basic supplies like bandages or antibiotics. Corruption was the glue that held this dysfunctional system together, with politicians and foreign firms colluding to siphon off the nation's wealth. The Burkinabe people, resilient but exhausted, were surviving on sheer willpower, their hope eroded by decades of betrayal. Enter Captain Ibrahim Troere, a geology graduate turned soldier who'd spent years on the front lines fighting jihadists with outdated weapons and underfunded troops. Born in 1988, Troere was a child of Burkina Faso's struggles, raised in a nation where the legacy of Thomas Sankara, a revolutionary icon assassinated in 1987, still loomed large. When he led the coup in September 2022, ousting interim President Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba, Troere was driven by a burning sense of injustice. He'd seen soldiers die needlessly, betrayed by a government that prioritized foreign interests over its own people. At 34, he became one of the world's youngest leaders, and he's been moving at breakneck speed ever since. Troere's first act of defiance was to kick out French forces, ending decades of military presence that had failed to curb terrorism but succeeded in entrenching French influence. In January 2023, he gave France 30 days to pack up and leave. a move that stunned Paris and sent ripples across the Sahel. A slave who cannot assume his own revolt does not deserve to be pitied, Troere declared, channeling Sankara's anti-imperialist spirit. France retaliated by suspending aid and imposing